Welcome to the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. My name is Philip Boone, and my co-host is Caitlin Drake. Before we begin, I'd like to state that the views represented in this podcast are those of the individuals in this conversation and not the official position of Boston Avenue United Methodist Church.
Today our guest is Boston Avenue Senior Pastor, Reverend David Wiggs, and we'll be talking all things Christmas, which is my favorite. Welcome, David.
Hello.
So to start us off, I think this is probably an umbrella question that will expand to cover some more questions. But we'll start here. Is there a war on Christmas, and should we be worried about it?
Okay. I know there's some people who wage a war on Christmas. I think that's a little displaced or misplaced, and I'm not worried about it. I think it's a little bit like expecting public schools to teach our children about Christian faith. I'm not against there being faith expressions in schools, but I shouldn't, as a parent or as a pastor, expect public school teachers to be the primary teachers about faith. They have other subject matter that they're committed to. We're committed to our kids learning, and so they teach that. I'm a pastor. I'm in a church. That's the appropriate place for religious education or Christian education to go on. Or if I'm a Christian parent, it would be my responsibility to raise my children in the faith if that's what my commitments are, and I want to share those with my kids. So trying to suggest that department stores or city governments be the ones who lead the charge for a Christian religious celebration, I think is a confused understanding of American democracy and the way our government is structured and the role of the church and the role of the state. And if we want to promote Christmas, then that would be Christians and Christian churches that should lead on that rather than attacking other people who choose not to celebrate the way we do.
To go with the war on Christmas idea, I want to talk about the abbreviation of Xmas.
Yeah.
Should we be worried about taking the Christ out of Christmas?
We should not, unless somebody is actually doing that. So Xmas is an abbreviation for Christmas. What a lot of people don't understand is what we see as the X is the Greek letter for Christ. So actually, biblically or religiously, you are actually putting Christ in Christmas in a different way than spelling it in English. But it's not taking the Christ out of Christmas. That's just people who don't understand that that's a Greek letter for Christ. And so they have a complaint about that, but I don't think they really understand what they're saying or why people use the X.
So I love all things Christmas.
Yes.
If you know me, you
love the holiday celebrations.
I have a different Christmas shirt or sweater that I wear every day in December. I'm currently wearing Christmas ornament earrings. My house is like Christmas exploded inside. I've got the tree and the stockings and the lights and the tinsel, and we had to go and buy more garland because I didn't have enough garland. So I really go hard for Christmas. So a lot of the things that I do around Christmas are more of those secular trappings.
Okay.
The tree, the stockings. Should Christians be thinking about rejecting those secular parts of Christmas to be good Christians during this season? Or is there a space for those more secular traditions or celebrations?
Okay. So most of the things you mentioned really started as religious, like a Christmas tree or garlands or decorating your house in a special way. Those are rooted in the Christian celebration of how Christians marked that something important was going on and we were celebrating an important holy day. So in some ways, those are not secular, only in that people who are not particularly religious or Christian have picked up those symbols and those ways of celebrating Christmas and use them even if they're not a devoted person of faith. So I guess you could call that secular, but I think in a way it's just a witness to how effective Christianity has been in promoting its own holy day as a nationwide or worldwide holiday. So I wouldn't worry about that. You know, the part that's the secularizing, I think that is probably the biggest challenge, is the whole idea of gift giving. So that's also rooted in the Christmas story, where Christians believe that Jesus is the greatest gift that God has given the world in terms of the revelation of God's love for humanity, which has morphed into we all give each other tokens of that when we give each other gifts. So that's a nice tradition. That has kind of been co-opted by capitalism and retail marketers and advertisers to suggest that all of us have to spend a lot of money buying lots of gifts if we're going to demonstrate that we really love people that are our friends and our family. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is that economic, capitalistic, consumerism kind of culture has co-opted in some ways the holiday from a holy day to a day, or now a month or more of shopping. When you begin to see things you can buy for Christmas in retail settings in October, I think that's a sign that consumerism has a really big stake in what started as Christian holy days or Christian days of celebration, and have taken over some of those pieces for their own particular purposes. So I think for us as Christians, the thing to be aware of is, do we understand the faith roots of that? Are we aware of our own consumerism? Are we aware of how that impacts the world, perhaps even in a negative way, even though the impulse to give a gift to someone we care about is a perfectly fine impulse? Probably how we monitor that and how that impacts individuals and families in terms of budgets and resources and other things that might be important in those families. I think that would be the part that I would be the most concerned about, more than trying to get non-Christians to celebrate Christmas the way Christians want to do that.
How can Christians be good witnesses for Christ during the holiday season?
So, what we're celebrating, we have the season of Advent, which is the preparation for Christmas. Most people think the 12 days of Christmas come leading up to Christmas, but actually in terms of religious and liturgical calendars, which is where the 12 days of Christmas come, the first day of Christmas is Christmas Day, and then we're supposed to celebrate Christmas for 12 days until the season of Epiphany, is what it's called, is the season that follows. That's a part of the Advent Christmas cycle in the liturgical calendar. And so we're preparing our hearts and minds to receive the love of God in Advent. Christmas, we're supposed to be receiving that love in its fullness in the birth of the Christ child. But in terms of how we live that out, we should not only be celebrating it that we have received the love, but as for Christians, as followers of Christ, we would want to share that love. So I think to your question, serving, volunteering, we have lots of people that go to do extra service in nonprofits, helping with a special Christmas meal at one of our nonprofits that's serving the underserved or the marginalized in different ways. We have people that do, kind things for their neighbors in their neighborhood as a part of being a Christian and expressing that love to people, whether they are Christians or not. I think those are the kind of key things. Obviously, we do a lot of things at the church as a part of worship to shape ourselves in the image of Christ and to try to put ourselves in a position to hear God speaking to us in our day in terms of how we live this love out that Jesus reveals to us as divine love being offered to the world and as a blessing to the world. So I think those kind of things would be the key, is how do you serve others? How do we help others? How do we do good for other people as a way to express that love that we receive, we believe is revealed, through the birth of Christ.
So thinking about the debate over whether to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, Boston Avenue has a really strong interfaith tradition. And I think a lot of folks at our church want to respect and honor other holidays that might be happening during this season. So what are some other holidays celebrated by other faith traditions at this time, and how do we be good neighbors to those folks?
Right. So I'm no expert on this, but certainly for Judaism, Hanukkah falls typically close to Christmas. I'm not even sure off the top of my head now that I think about it how they exactly date that, because there is a Jewish calendar that's a little different than kind of the Greco-Roman calendar that Americans use. So I think, one, we can, although I'm not a very good example of this right now, be more aware of their holidays and respect those and learn about those. And certainly you can wish a person in another faith happy holidays. If you live in America, if you live in the United States of America, you're not going to miss that we're celebrating Christmas. Whether you're a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindu, a person of no faith, you can't miss it. Now, whether you understand it as a devoted Christian would or not, that's another thing. But for us to be more aware of other faith traditions and their holidays, the month of Ramadan is a really important time for Muslims. It moves on the calendar some. It's usually February, March in there, but it moves some based on their calendar, how they determine their holidays. But to be aware of some of those really important holidays for other traditions, I think is important. To recognize, again, sort of where we started this conversation today, is that Christmas, even though it's celebrated widely, is not a civic holiday. It's a faith holiday. And so I think there's nothing wrong in civic settings of using happy holidays over against Merry Christmas. I don't have anything against Merry Christmas, but that's really a Christian expression. So I'm not sure that we don't sort of diminish it when we think that everyone's celebrating it the same and we assume that everyone's faith is the same as ours. That's really, if you think about it, not accurate, and so not really helpful to assume that about other people if you don't know about their faith or their faith tradition or their expression of spiritual life or whatever. So I think the awareness is probably the first step, and then there's some decisions we can make in terms of how we express our own faith in ways that really do express the love of the world, the love of all peoples that are talked about both in the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures out of our tradition, in terms of God's concern is for all the people of the world, even if all people don't endorse Jesus as their personal Lord or Savior the way Christians would claim. I don't know if I exactly did I get to the answer or answer what you were asking?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't Christians celebrate Hanukkah or other holidays that are rooted in the Old Testament?
Okay, so there's a whole cycle of Jewish holidays and Jewish life that, even though Christianity is rooted in Judaism and grows out of Judaism, and it is important to remember that, in my opinion, Jesus was Jewish, not Christian. All the Christian holidays have evolved in a way that supersede pagan holidays or secular holidays or holidays from the Roman Empire, which were in vogue at the time the Christianity is being born and comes to life. And so we have developed this Christian liturgical calendars with certain holy days built around the life of Christ. And so those are the ones we celebrate, even though we can read about, like, the story that's the root and the context for Hanukkah. We can read about that in scriptures from the Hebrew scriptures of what some Christians call the Old Testament. We can look at that and understand it. But as Christianity evolved, it chose its own set of holidays or holy days that have become holidays in a sense. And so we celebrate those as part of the liturgical calendar and the growth of Christianity as it's developed over hundreds of years, rather than the older holy days that we might have read about in Hebrew scriptures, and that the Judaism in many cases is still celebrating.
So another question, and kind of the all things Christmas question.
Yes.
Theologically, do we need to believe that Jesus was literally born on December 25th as a tenet of our faith?
Okay. No. My short answer would be no, we don't have to believe that. We don't really have a record of Jesus's birthday being December 25. When you read some of the Gospels that tell us about the shepherds who got a special message from God via angelic messengers, they're in the fields taking care of the sheep, which makes it sound like it's a time of year that sheep and shepherds are out of doors, which in the Middle East, I'm not a climate expert about the Middle East or Israel or the Holy Land, although I am going in February, so I'll know more soon.
You can let us know.
But it doesn't say that it was in December or the 25th of a month or any of that. Again, sort of what we were talking about just a moment ago in terms of the evolution of Christianity and the development of a liturgical calendar with certain high holy days or certain times of the year where we emphasize a particular theological point that's tied to a holy day or a holiday. We do know that there was a Roman pagan celebration, December 25th or thereabouts, that celebrated different gods and different things tied to pagan celebrations of the end of winter, where the days are getting shorter and the days begin to get longer after the winter solstice. So it appears in the development of Christianity, particularly as it spread throughout the Roman Empire and finally was adopted as the official religion of Rome, that a number of days of celebration that were pagan or Roman were co-opted by the Christians once they were the official religion of the empire into Christian holy days, and Christmas is one of those that appears to have taken over a pagan celebration and made it a Christian celebration and a holy day, and then tied it to, the liturgical calendar revolves around the life, the birth, life, and death and resurrection of Christ. So you'll note the holy days have to do with his life and ministry, his death and resurrection. And having the birthday on December 25th appears to be a function of that connection of using what was popular in terms of a calendar time of celebration and tying to it Christian theological significance. So I think that's what's going on with that. So I don't think that it's a key tenet of Christian faith to endorse that or not.
So speaking of key tenets of Christian faith, for folks who have listened previously, they might know that I'm what I term a recovering Catholic.
Okay.
So within the Catholic faith, particularly, the Virgin Mary has a very strong role in theological life and in the life of the church. And so, what is the Methodist perspective of Mary, and is the virgin element, the virgin birth, an important theological tenet, particularly in Methodist traditions?
Certainly not as important in Methodism as in Catholicism. Methodists do affirm the ancient and historic creeds, which do affirm virgin birth. There's a lot of scholarship that's been done around, again, the root words for virgin, which in the Hebrew and Greek basically meant young woman, not young woman who'd never had any sexual contact. So it did get developed as a very important piece of Catholic theology. It's not been an emphasis within Methodism like it has within Catholicism. But there would be Methodists who would say, if you don't believe in the virgin birth, you're not really a Christian. But again, I would differ with that. I don't think that's one of the essential tenets of Christianity, is to affirm something biological in terms of who Mary was or how Jesus was conceived or how he was born. I think those are stories that and concepts and theological constructs that really get developed after Jesus has been recognized as anointed or as the Christ or the Messiah by the Christian community, and they begin to develop more of the narrative about who he was and why he's special. And certainly in the cultures of the day, having a special kind of birth or a virgin birth elevated the status of the person And so you can see why that maybe was important when they were writing those stories. Jesus doesn't ever mention it as a part of something that distinguished his relationship with God, or never mentions it in a way that says, oh, here's a piece of doctrine that you have to believe. So I think that gives us a lot of latitude as Christians in terms of what's essential to the faith or what's a key tenet that someone has to believe. The other thing about Methodism is that we've never been a faith that was doctrinaire or based on a certain confession or doctrine that you had to endorse or sign or confess to, like some of our other Christian denominations do. John Wesley, as an Anglican priest, never left the Anglican Church. He really was not trying to start a new denomination. There's really just the spiritual revival that grows up around him. And so he wasn't trying to write new doctrine or new theology or make specific points about something like virgin birth. He did take the Articles of Religion of the Church of England, but amended those for Methodist and left out some of the things that he thought were not key that the Anglican Church had affirmed. So it's part of our history, but I don't think it is it's not a requirement in terms of being a Methodist or a Methodist Christian.
Do the different narratives of Jesus' birth contradict each other?
Okay, so you're talking about the gospel stories.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we think about it and we look at the four gospels that are canonical or in the scriptures that we believe are the key books that God uses to reveal to us who God is, we believe Mark, even though in the order of most Bibles, Mark's not the first one. Mark, we believe, based on scholarship, is the first one written, and there's no birth narrative at all. So that's kind of an argument that you can have a gospel and you can be a Christian without a virgin birth or without a birth narrative at all, and you're still in the box of Christian in terms of theology and belief. Then John, we believe, is the last gospel written, probably not until 70 years after the death of Jesus, around 100 perhaps. And John goes all the way back to creation and grounds the story of Jesus in creation, but also doesn't tell a birth narrative, moves from creation kind of all the way to ministry of Jesus as an adult in a different way than the other Gospels do. So that leaves us Matthew and Luke. They're the ones who have birth narratives. Matthew's focus is primarily on Joseph's perspective and Joseph's side of the story. Luke focuses more on Mary and Mary's side of the story. So they're telling it from different perspectives, but they do tell different parts of the story, which if you wanted to argue are contradictions, you could argue that. Certainly there are major differences in terms of how they tell the story of who did what and where and which angel spoke to whom and all those kind of things. So, there's certainly inconsistencies would probably be a more comfortable word than a contradiction, but you can see how you could argue contradiction quite easily. But you're really just talking about Matthew and Luke as the two that actually have a birth narrative at all. The others, Mark and John, leave that out. So does that help?
Excellent. I want to now talk a little bit about Santa. How should Christians navigate Santa, as far as Santa is kind of like, in that story, it's kind of like a godlike figure, knows when we're sleeping, knows who is watching us. And if a kid stops believing in Santa, how can Christians navigate that with being afraid that they might stop believing in God because they're kind of both involved with Christmas and the holidays?
Right. I think there is some confusion among people about all that. Santa is based on St. Nicholas, who was a real person. United Methodists don't really have saints, but we use that, like St. Paul wrote epistles or that kind of thing. And St. Nicholas was sainted, was a person who did good things, gave gifts to children without gifts in his day, as the information, and whether that's all factual or how much is fact and how much is embellishment. It's hard to know. But at any rate, a real person who did show love and did good things for children and those who were in need in his own day. And so that's great. Now, then when we add popular songs that say that, Santa knows who's naughty and nice, and if you're not the right kind of person or you're not a nice child, you're not going to get gifts, that really does stray pretty far from what we're celebrating in terms of the grace of God and God's love of us without us doing anything except for recognizing that love and accepting it. So I think that is tricky. I think there's also, families, parents have to make decisions. Kids enjoy stories like Easter bunnies and Santa Claus, but I think the downside is as they get older and realize, oh, wait a minute, that's all a fairy tale in a sense. Some of them take that really well. Some of people feel very betrayed and lose trust in their parents or in faith or in God, as you were saying. So I think it is a delicate matter in terms of how one navigates that. Every family kind of has to decide how much they're gonna emphasize that and when they're gonna tell their children. My wife and I were just like, we're not gonna lie to our kids. So when they were old enough to ask that question, we just said, yeah, Santa is like this. It's not like this person's really coming down the chimney to leave you gifts. Mom and dad are doing that. Your grandparents are doing that. But we also said to them, don't tell your friends because not every family addresses this the same way we are. So I think that's the tricky part is how you handle that with children so that you don't disenfranchise them from their faith by trying to have a fun holiday character. So I don't know. What do you think?
That was a good answer to me. I wasn't expecting you to turn it back on me. But no, that was
you have children now.
Yeah, we do the whole Santa thing.
Right.
We love the whole spirit of Christmas. I hope nobody is listening to this podcast who is under a certain age.
Right.
I think we might need to put a spoiler alert in the line.
A disclaimer at the beginning of the...
Yes.
Yeah. So fun question. What is your favorite Christmas song and your favorite Christmas hymn?
Oh, well, I don't know if I've narrowed that down. Certainly I love Joy to the World. It's a very up-tempo and expresses the whole idea of God's love and joy coming to the world through God's love. So I enjoy that a lot. I don't know. There's just so many great. I probably enjoy Christmas music the way you enjoy the whole Christmas holiday season, and so I can like Christmas jazz music or country and western Christian songs. I love it all. So I don't know that I have a favorite Christmas song beyond probably "Joy to the World." Probably is really my favorite Christmas hymn.
Caitlin, I want to ask you the same question. What is your favorite Christmas hymn and Christmas song?
I don't know about a hymn, but my favorite Christmas song is I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas.
Oh,
rude.
I don't even know that song, I don't think.
Well, I will treat you to the musical stylings because I know all the words at a later time.
You're not going to sing it?
One of my really good friends, that's his least favorite one. So I always play it for him whenever, put it on his Facebook wall.
You help him out?
Yeah, I help him out.
It is a Christmas classic. Also, it has Oklahoma roots. Did you know that?
I did not know.
I did not know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go.
Did you want to chime in on that, Philip, as long as we're all saying our favorites?
My favorite Christmas hymn is What Child Is This? Because I love the tune Greensleeves.
I do, too.
I love that tune.
Right.
And then from the Faith We Sing book, it's called Star Child. Is one of my favorite
That is a good one.
hymns as well. Favorite Christmas song is probably White Christmas or the Christmas song with chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I like that one.
Classics.
Exactly. Favorite Christmas tradition, David?
Probably, so I'm a pastor. Christmas Eve's a pretty big time for a Christian, so we're doing lots of services typically at a church on Christmas Eve, but we also usually there's a gap between the services we have around dinner time and the late service at 11 or 12, depending on what church you're at. So my immediate family usually, once my wife and I were married and had our own children and they were big enough to open gifts, we would light a candle, we'll sing Joy to the World and maybe another song or two from the Christmas tradition, and then open some gifts, just the four of us. I have a son-in-law now, so it's five of us. But it's sort of probably that family, that just immediate family time where we are in the home celebrating, talking about why Christmas is important, exchanging, a few gifts just among us is a treasured time.
Caitlin?
I have two traditions. So with my family, my mom collects Christmas cookie jars, and she has like 20 Christmas cookie jars, and each jar has a different cookie that we bake to put in it. So we make this huge assortment of cookies, and my sisters and I all have our own specialties, our cookies that are our responsibility to make.
Nice.
And then when I was little, our teachers would get plates of cookies, and now that my sisters are grown, it's their friends or our neighbors or people in our community. So that's one of my family's Christmas traditions that I love. And so I'll be bringing my specialty cookie to our office cookie exchange next week. And then we in my family would cut down our Christmas tree every year. Because my parents,
you'd go cut a live tree down?
Yeah, they're in Colorado, so they
Right.
would get a permit to one of the forests. We'd drive up to the mountains, hike all over, yell which tree we thought was the best tree, have snowball fights determining whose tree is the best tree, hack it down, drag it to the car. So it was a whole long big day
fun
process.
had by all.
And then decorating the tree was another big thing. So each of my sisters and I have our own ornament tubs that have all of our childhood ornaments and the ones that my parents have given us over the years. So this is my first year with my own purchased home ownership house. And so my mom tried to get me to take my Christmas tub when I was home for Thanksgiving, and I almost cried because I was not quite ready.
Right.
But I think next year will be my tub on my tree.
Growing up for me, when I was in my favorite tradition was when I was in fifth grade, we started making Christmas videos. We made them for my dad's parents, or my dad's mom and my dad's family. And and what we did we would lip sync to a Christmas song. And the first one we did was Bing Crosby's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And we did it every year up until I was maybe a junior in college or a sophomore in college. So we have like 11 videos of us lip syncing songs, and you can see us grow and get bigger and get older. And that was what we did every single year, and it was probably my favorite growing up. Now I don't really. Our traditions are constantly changing because we lived in Oklahoma City with my parents, or in the same city as my parents, so it was easier to get together with them. Mm-hmm. And now we're in Tulsa, so we're slowly changing traditions each year until we get comfortable with one. But we have holiday cinnamon rolls for all the holidays. So that's this year we'll probably do like crock pot, a new recipe cinnamon roll. So we're gonna try something out.
Will you be bringing cinnamon rolls to the cookie exchange? Should I count on that? Now that you've brought it up, and I might like those.
I don't know if it counts as a cookie.
Well, I would include it.
All sweet treats are cookies.
Okay, David, do you have anything?
Just a personal request. Cinnamon rolls at the cookie exchange.
David, do you have anything else that you would like to add about Christmas in general?
I think the important thing is it is easy to get kind of caught up in Christmas in such a way that it becomes stressful and difficult for families, whether it's the budget kind of thing I talked about earlier, or just, like you're talking about, we've got to go out of town to see this family, then we've got to get over here, and the kids' school programs, and there's all this church stuff, and all of a sudden it just becomes a burden that there's too much to do, which I think is a sad part of Christmas, is if we don't find in all the hustle and bustle of the celebration that kind of seed or core piece of the importance of our relationship with God being the centering part of our lives and what brings richness to our lives, and that we're celebrating the beginning of that through the birth of Christ in a special way for Christians in terms of God's love, healing us, saving us, redeeming us, however you want to talk about it. So that's what I hope for people, is they really do receive sort of what's at the heart of Christmas as a blessing in the midst of all the hustle and bustle of all the trappings around Christmas.
Excellent. Thank you. I do want to add that we have 3 services on Christmas Eve. We have a 2:00 service in Jubilee Hall, which is going to have a children's time, and families are invited.
Right.
Then we have the 5:00 service, which will be in the sanctuary where David is going to be preaching. And then we have the 11:00 service where another one of our pastors, Jen Logsden Kellogg, is going to be preaching
Correct.
that sermon. And then it's going to be, and then the chapel choir singing that one, the youth choir, and it's followed by the youth singing the Hallelujah chorus
Right.
in Bishop's Hall. And the 11:00 service is also one of my favorite traditions, because that was always my favorite service growing up. So I'm excited for that as well.
Right.
But you have 3 opportunities. If you would like to join us on Christmas Eve, we will welcome you here. This has been the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. We are located at 1301 South Boston Avenue in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. Please check out our social media for more information on what's going on at Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you.